Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning today in Yirtzeh Hashem, Daf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tefillin. We pick up on the bottom line of Lamed Gimel Amid Aleph, Siman Chaf Hey Sif Vav. Now, we learned previously the concept of Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. We learned that when you put away your talis and tefillin, it's important to place them in the bag so that when you open the bag, you encounter the talis first. Because we learned Malin B'Kodesh, you're supposed to put on the talis before the tefillin. But if you open up the bag and you encounter the tefillin first, then you're going to have to put on the tefillin first because Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. You're not allowed to pass by the tefillin in order to go get the talis. So we've had this concept of Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. I'll tell you, by the way, just another interesting place where the concept of Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs comes up, and that is by the Pesach Seder, by the Ka'ara. We know that there are different minhagim of how to set up the Ka'ara. The Gra, and this, it makes sense if you think about the Gra, right? The Hagra was, he was very much guided, all the G'dalim are guided by halacha, but I guess what I would say is he was a very strict, technical, halacha person. So how did the Gra set up his Ka'ara? Well, essentially, what is the Ka'ara? The Ka'ara is a plate that has on it everything that you need to be Mekayim the mitzvahs halayla. Not the yayin, not the dalad kaisais, but everything else is there on the Ka'ara, right? So you have your karpas is on the Ka'ara, the matzah is on the Ka'ara, the maror is on the Ka'ara, the charosis is on the Ka'ara. So you have all of these things that you're going to use for the mitzvahs halayla. So the Gra looked at the Ka'ara, and the Gra said, okay, there's an order of precedence to these items, because the Seder, right, we call it a Seder. Seder means order. There is an order to the Seder. Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. There's an order to the Seder. And there is an order in which we're going to be Mekayim the mitzvahs. So the Gra looked at the Ka'ara, and the Gra said, well, we have to keep in mind Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. So how is the Gra's Ka'ara set up? Very simple. At closest to him on the Ka'ara was the Karpas on the right side, and Mei Melach, salt water, on the left side. Because the first mitzvah that you're going to be Mekayim after Kadesh, after Kiddush, the first mitzvah you're going to do is the Karpas. So you always give precedence to the Yamin, to the right over the left. So you put the Karpas closest to him on the right side, and the Mei Melach that you're going to dip the Karpas into would be on the left side. Okay, what's the next mitzvah you're going to do? That's going to be Achilas Matzah. Right? You have Magid, but the Haggadah is not on the Ka'ara. So you're going to have Achilas Matzah. So on the Ka'ara was the Matzah. And the Matzah was a little bit further away. After Matzah is Maror. So after the Matzah, on the right side was the Maror. And on the left side was the charosis that you're going to dip the Maror into. After the Maror and the charosis, that's where you had the Zraya and the Beitzah. Because the Zraya and the Beitzah, you don't really use them in the Kiyam HaMitzvahs, but they belonged on the Kara, but they go all the way on the end. In this way, you're never Maver Al HaMitzvahs. If you set it up in a different way, let's say you have the Karpas positioned somewhere further away from you than the Maror and the Charosis. So then when you go to get the Karpas, you're going to have to be Maver Al HaMitzvahs. You're going to pass by the Maror and the Charosis in order to get to the Karpas. So the Gra set up his Ka'ara very much in harmony with this concept of Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. I use a Gra's Ka'ara, but what's interesting is a Gra's Ka'ara takes up a lot of room because the matzahs are actually on the Ka'ara. So you have the matzahs on the Ka'ara, you have everything else. So it's actually a very large Ka'ara. Yeah, I use a very large rectangular tray, and that's what everything is positioned on. But in any case, it's just interesting. Another place where we have Ein Mavirin Al HaMitzvahs. So, with that little hakdama, let's go to the bottom line, Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, Siman Chafei Sivav. Im Paga B'Shel Rosh Tchila. We learned yesterday that the proper way to put on tefillin is first you put on the Shel Yad. Our minig is we follow the psak of the Gra that we make a bracha of lahanyach tefillin on the Shel Yad, and then we put on the Shel Rosh and we make the bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin. Now, what happens if you pick up the Shel Rosh first? Im paga b'Shel Rosh tchila. If you pick up the Shel Rosh first, now you might think, okay, so that's kind of like picking up the tefillin before I pick up the talis. Over there, we learned that you have to actually put on the tefillin first because of Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs. Over here, the Mechaber says no. Im paga b'Shel Rosh tchila. If you actually go and take the Shel Rosh tchila, tzarich laha'avir al oisa hamitzvah. You have to be maver al hamitzvahs, and you have to put down the Shel Rosh, v'yaniach Shel Yad tchila, and put on the Shel Yad first, v'achar kach Shel Rosh. So even though you're going to be maver on the mitzvah of the Shel Rosh, nevertheless, you have no choice. You have to be maver on that mitzvah, and you have to put on the Shel Yad first. Why is that? Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Turn back to Lamad Gimel, Lamad Aleph. Bottom line, Mishnah Berurah is cutting Chav Beis, says to Chavetz Chaim, Paga, Dafka Paga. This is only true if you were Pageya in the Shel Rosh Tchila. If you went and you took the Shel Rosh first, but you did not yet put it on. Dafka Paga. Aval im hiniach Shel Rosh Tchila. Let's say you took the Shel Rosh and you actually put the Shel Rosh on before the Shel Yad. And then you woke up and you said, what am I doing? I'm supposed to put on the Shel Yad first. Should you now take off the Shel Rosh to put on the Shel Yad first? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Aval im hiniach Shel Rosh tchila. If you actually put on the Shel Rosh before the Shel Yad, or another case, shemotza ha-Shel Yad shenishmat mimekaymoi. Let's say you put on your Shel Yad, you put on your Shel Rosh, and then in the middle of davening, something happened, and you find that your Shel Yad slipped off, and it's no longer in the proper placement on your arm. Maybe it's slipped all the way down to your elbows. So you're not being mekayim the mitzvah of the Shel Yad now. It's as if you're not wearing the Shel Yad. So now you might think, oh, I have to put on the Shel Yad first, so maybe I should take off the Shel Rosh, put the Shel Yad back in its place, and then put the Shel Rosh back on. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Or if you found that the Shel Yad slipped off its proper place, ein lahaser Shel Rosh. In both of these cases, do not take off the Shel Rosh. Demai dahava hava. Over here, what happened, happened. And instead, you should just make sure to very quickly return the Shel Yad to its place. Or if you put on the Shel Rosh mistakenly before the Shel Yad, don't take the Shel Rosh first. Just quickly go take the Shel Yad and put on the Shel Yad. V'ayin b'bir halacha, and he sends us to the bir halacha. Now this bir halacha is on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. It's Dibur HaMaschil Paga. It's a lengthy bir halacha. I'm not going to go through the bir halacha inside, but I'll give you a little bit of what the Chavetz Chaim says in this bir halacha. Essentially, what is the halacha that we do? Well, you know what? Before I even say that, let's just do Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Chav Gimel so that we'll understand where this whole halacha is coming from. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Chav Gimel, Laha'avir. In this case, you have to be maver al mitzvahs. Why? Because kevan diksiv bikra meforash the yad kodim. Because the need to put on the Shel Yad before the Shel Rosh is not some kind of minig. It's a pasuk. Because the pasuk says the mitchila ukeshartam. First, the pasuk says ukeshartam la'ois al yadecha. First, you should tie the Tefillin Shel Yad onto your arm. V'hodar ulutaytafais, and only then does it say ulutaytafais beinei necha. Lefikach ein mashgichin al havaras hamitzvah. So in essence, what we see over here is like this: we have a conflict. If you go ahead and you pick up the Shel Rosh first, we now have a conflict. On the one hand, we have the concept of ein mavir and ala mitzvahs, which would seem to dictate that you should put on the Shel Rosh first, because otherwise you're going to be mavir on the mitzvah of the Shel Rosh. On the other hand, we have a pasuk. The pasuk says, the Torah, the pasuk dictates that we must put on the Shel Yad first and then the Shel Rosh. Therefore, says the Mechaber, that the pasuk trumps ein mavir and ala mitzvah. The pasuk says Shel Yad first. You're holding the Shel Rosh, too bad. You got to put the Shel Rosh down. You have to be maver on the mitzvah, and you have to take the Shel Yad, and you have to put on the Shel Yad. However, in the two cases given by the Mishnah Berurah, you already put on the Shel Rosh. If you just picked it up, so now you'll be maver ala mitzvah. So you'll put it down, you'll take the Shel Yad, and you'll put on your tefillin the way you're supposed to. Shel Yad first, Shel Rosh afterwards, and you'll be makayim the dictate of the pasuk. But said the Chavetz Chaim, if you put on the Shel Rosh first, so it's already on your head, now you don't take it off and then put on the Shel Yad. Or in his other case, if you are wearing the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, and the Shel Yad slipped off, so now it's as if it's not there. Again, you do not take off the Shel Rosh and then put on the Shel Yad. Now, why not? Why don't we say that we have to follow the dictate of the pasuk? So the Chavetz Chaim explains in the Bir Halacha the difference. The Chavetz Chaim explains you have to realize we paskin that the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh are not ma'akiv one another. If you wear a Shel Yad without a Shel Rosh, you're mekayim the mitzvah of wearing a Shel Yad. You're mekayim the mitzvah of kishartem la'isal yadecha. If you wear a Shel Rosh without a Shel Yad, you're mekayim the mitzvah of Shel Rosh, and you're mekayim the mitzvah of ulutaytafais bein einecha. So each one is an independent mitzvah. Now, the proper way to be mekayim both mitzvahs is to put on the Shel Yad first and then the Shel Rosh, so that when you're wearing the Shel Rosh, you're wearing both of them. That's the proper way to be mekayim the mitzvah. So, if you go ahead and you pick up the Shel Rosh first, you got to put it back down. You have to put it back down. You have to be maver on the mitzvah, because you have to be mekayim the mitzvah the proper way. But if you're already wearing the Shel Rosh, now if we told you that you have to take the Shel Rosh off, you know what we're telling you? We're telling you that even though you're being mekayim a mitzvah, b'chol rega v'rega, every second that you're wearing the Shel Rosh, you're being mekayim a mitzvah. So now we would be telling you, take off the Shel Rosh, stop being mekayim the mitzvah of Shel Rosh. For what? So that you should be able to put on the Shel Yad and then the Shel Rosh and be mekayim the mitzvah kitikuna. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that we don't do. We're not going to tell you to actively stop being mekayim the mitzvah of Shel Rosh, take the Shel Rosh off, in order to be mekayim the mitzvah kitikuna. And there are some interesting rayas to this. One, I'll mention here, because it's the guide to those of you who are learning Daf Yomi. If you're learning Masechtas Yevamos, Ashrecha v'Tovlach, what a great schus, you're all working hard on Masechtas Yevamos. So I'll bring you a raya from Masechtas Yevamos. We know the Mishnah Yevamos tells us that mitzvah al harosh al agodol liyabim. The mitzvah is on the oldest one of the brothers. If there are multiple brothers, so we turn to the gadol of the achim first. The oldest brother is the one who has the ikar mitzvah to go be miyabim or to do chalitza. If the older brother doesn't want to be miyabim, then we offer the second brother to be miyabim before the older brother does chalitza. Right? So we offer the second brother to be miyabim. But mitzvah ala gadol liyabim. That's what the Mishnah says. However, the Mishnah also says, what do we do if the gadol is in Medina Sayam? The gadol is overseas. And there's a younger brother here in front of us who says he's willing to be miyabim now. Then we don't wait. Then we let the katan go ahead and be miyabim. Why? Why don't we say that we should wait for the gadol to come back so that we could be mekayim the mitzvah kitikuna? The proper way to be mekayim the mitzvah is with the gadol. So why shouldn't we wait for the gadol? Elamai, we're not mashe a mitzvah. We don't delay a mitzvah. If we could be mekayim the mitzvah now, we're mekayim the mitzvah now. So if we could be mekayim the mitzvah now with the younger brother, we do the mitzvah with the younger brother. So too over here. If you're being mekayim the mitzvah of the Shel Rosh, we're not going to tell you to stop being mekayim the mitzvah of the Shel Rosh so that you could be mekayim the mitzvah of the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh kitikuna. No. Okay, so quickly take the Shel Yad and put the Shel Yad on. Once you put the Shel Yad on, now already fine. when you have both on when you're wearing the Shel Rosh, which seems to be the Ikar Hakpada. The Ikar Hakpada is that when you're wearing the Shel Rosh, you should be wearing both. You shouldn't wear the Shel Rosh alone. So fine, quickly go ahead and put on the Shel Yad. But we're not going to tell you to take off the Shel Rosh. Okay. It is a very interesting biur halacha. There's a whole back and forth, different rayas, how to slug up the rayas. It's an interesting biur halacha if you could go take a look at it. Okay. Now we go to Siv Zayin. Says the Mechaber. Yevarech lahaniach b'kametz tachas hahei. When we make the bracha asher kiddishanu b'mitzvos of itzivanu lahaniach tefillin, there's a kametz under the hay, lahaniach, not lahaniach. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in chav dalet. Lahaniach b'kametz shehu lashon hanacha. That is a lashon that connotes placement. I just want to quickly look up the pasuk that the Mishnah Berurah brings down. I meant to open this earlier, and I just didn't get to it. Sorry, I always apologize for these delays. It's my fault. I should have been better prepared. Okay, it's Yecheskel Mem Dalid. Yecheskel Mem Dalid. Pasuk Lamed. No. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So the Mishnah Berurah says that with a kametz, it's a lashon of hanacha. It's a lashon of placement. Kemoshe Kasav, like the pasuk says in Yecheskel, lahaniach beracha el beisecha. This is a pasuk over here that speaks about the matanas kaihanim, like truma. And it says over here in the pasuk, Verashis kol bikurei koil. This is a reference to the bikurim. Verashis kol bikurei koil. We know that the first fruits, right, in Eretz Yisrael, the first fruits for the Shivas Aminim, v'chol trumas koil, and so too all of the truma, mikol truma yisechem, la kohanim yihiyeh, should be given to the kohanim. Verashis arisoi sechem, and also challah. Verashis arisoi sechem, the beginning of your challah, when you make a dough, titinu la kohen, you should give to the kohen, lahaniach bracha el beisecha, so that a bracha should rest. Lahaniach, it should rest. Lahaniach bracha el beisecha, so that bracha should rest on your home. So you see that lahaniach with a kametz is a lashon that connotes placement, resting on a specific place. So that's the bracha that we make, lahaniach tefillin, to place the tefillin on our arm. V'loi bepatach, says the Chavetz Chaim, but you should not say lahaniach with a patach. Shehu lashon aziva. Lahaniach means to leave something. Kemoshe Kasav, like it says in the pasuk by the Shvatim in Yosef HaTzadik, achichem echad hanichu iti. Yosef HaTzadik told the other Shvatim, he said, you want me to trust you? You want me to believe that you're not spies? What you should do is you should leave one of your brothers with me. One of you should be left here with me and go back down to Eretz Canaan and bring back Binyamin with you. So he said, hanichu iti, leave him with me. So you see the great difference that there is in the vowelization between lahaniach and lahaniach. They mean two separate things. So you might think, not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. The bracha has to be lahaniach, not lahaniach. Now we go to Sivches. Second line in the Shulchan Aruch says the Mechaber. We know the golden rule, kol ha-mitzvos mevarach aleim oiver la'asiyasam. Whenever we make a bracha, we always make it oiver la'asiyasam. We make it before we do the mitzvah. The lashon oiver over here is a lashon that connotes before. And again, we bring a riot to this from a pasuk. Now this is talking about by Avshalom, when Avshalom had made his unfortunate rebellion against David HaMelech, and he was killed. Avshalom was killed, and runners went to bring the news to David HaMelech. So Yoav told Akushi, an Eina Yehudi, that he should be the one to go tell the Melech, because he knew that the Melech would not appreciate receiving this news. But Achimatz ben Tzadok, he was the one, he wanted to give David HaMelech the news. He thought he was giving David HaMelech good news, that his enemies had been vanquished. So the pasuk says, Vayosef oid Achimatz ben Tzadok. Achimatz ben Tzadok continued. He was Yosef, even though Yoav told Achimatz, don't go run and tell this to David HaMelech, you're not bringing him welcome news. Vayosef oid Achimatz ben Tzadok. He persisted. Vayomer el Yoav, and he told Yoav, V'yehima, whatever happened will be okay. Arutza nagam oni acharei akushi. I'm going to run after the Eina Yehudi to go tell David HaMelech. Vayomer Yoav lama zeh atarotz b'ni yulecha ein b'sara moitzeis. He said, this is not such a good idea. I don't know why you're running to do this. Giving the news to David HaMelech is not going to bring you anything good. The next pasuk says, Vayoratz Achimatz derech hakikar. Achimatz ran across the plains. Vaya'avoyer es hakushi. And he overtook the Kushi. So what does that mean? He came before the Kushi. So that's where we see that over could mean before. So that's just an explanation of why we say a bracha should be made over lasiyasan. It means before the kiyum of the mitzvah. A lot of people look at it, they say it seems backwards, right? We know that there's a lashon asid, a lashon that connotes future, and a lashon avar, a lashon that connotes past. So they confuse the word over with avar. Avar means past. So over lasiyasan, it sounds like past the asiyah. After we do the kiyum mitzvah, we make the bracha. No, over lasiyasan means before. Before we do the bracha, before we do the mitzvah, we say the bracha. And the raya is from this pasuk, and this is brought down here in the Ramah. So let's just read from the beginning of Sivches. Kol ha-mitzvah is bevarach aleim over lasiyasan. By all mitzvahs, we make the bracha before the kiyum mitzvah. Pirush koidim. Says the Ramah that over means before. Vayavar es hakushi. When the pasuk says that Achimatz overtook the Kushi, Perusha, the explanation of that pasuk is Rotz, he ran, v'hikdim lefanov, and he got there before him. So that's over lasiyasam. In any case, says the Bechaber, lefikach, since we have to make the bracha over lasiyasan, tzarich levarich ala Tefillin Shel Yad, we have to make a bracha on the Tefillin Shel Yad, achar hanacha al hakibayris, after we place the Tefillin Shel Yad on the arm in the proper area, koidim kishirasam, before we tighten it and tie it onto our arm. Shekishirasam zuhi asiyasam, because it's the tightening and the tying of the tefillin onto the arm that is the kiyum mitzvah. So when do you make the bracha? As close to the kiyum mitzvah as possible. So you don't make the bracha while you're holding the Tefillin Shel Yad in your hand. You put it onto your arm, get it into the proper place on the arm, and then right before you tighten it, that's when you make the bracha, right before the kiyum mitzvah. Hagah, says the Ramah, the Chen b'Shel Rosh, the same halacha applies to the Shel Rosh. Koidem shemahadkai b'Roshai. You make the bracha over lasiyasan, which means before you tighten it onto the head, not before you put it on the head. Like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, you don't make the bracha on the Shel Rosh while you're holding the Shel Rosh in your hand. You don't make the bracha even when it's positioned over your head. You make the bracha when it's already on the head, but before it's tightened into place on the head. That's when you make the bracha. Let's see this in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chav Hey. Achar hanacha, you make the bracha after you place the Tefillin Shel Yad on the arm. Because before this, it would not be proper to make the bracha. To have koidim to koidim, because that's another step earlier. You got to make the bracha koidim, but the asiyah, right before the asiyah. That means right before you tighten it. If you make it before you put it on your arm, then there's two steps left. One is you got to put it on the arm, and then you have to tighten it. That's koidim to koidim. V'tzarich lekarev habracha la'asiyas hamitzvah. We have to bring the bracha as close to the kiyam hamitzvah b'chol ma de'efsher, as much as possible. We make the bracha before we tie it on. Now here's a very interesting Mishnah Berurah. What happens if I goofed? What happens if I went ahead and I put the tefillin on? I tightened it, and now I actually maybe already did the whole thing. What do I do now? I didn't make the bracha at the right spot. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ubedieved yevarech afilu achakach. Bedieved, the Pri Megadim says, you can make the bracha even later. The implication is, even after the tefillin are already on, you could still make the bracha. And you don't have to take the tefillin off. Oh, I forgot to make a bracha. I'll take the tefillin off, and I'll make a bracha then. The implication over here, the Mishnah Berurah says, no. He brings down from the Pri Megadim, that is not necessary. Why not? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the mitzvah, and this is, I love these Mishnah Berurahs. You have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 words. The mitzvah sheyesh la meshech zmanhu bekula yuma. This is a mitzvah that involves a long span of time. It's a mitzvah that involves the entire day. What does the Mishnah Berurah mean? I'll tell you what the Mishnah Berurah means. What did we just learn? We learned that a bracha has to be made over la'asiyasan. You have to make it before the kiyam mitzvah. All right. When we look at putting on tefillin, when are you mekayim the mitzvah? Before you tighten it on your arm, you're not being mekayim the mitzvah yet. After you tighten it on your arm, that's when you start being mekayim the mitzvah. So properly, when should the bracha be made? Right before you tie it on. Right before you tie it on, you make the bracha. That's over la'asiyasan. But now you blew it. You put on the tefillin before you went there and made the bracha. So what do? Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you can make a bracha right now. You know why? Because when you wear tefillin throughout the day, you're being mekayim the mitzvah every minute. B'chol rega v'rega, you're being mekayim the mitzvah. So if I look at my clock right now on my computer screen, it's 1:23 p.m. on May 24th, 2022. If I would be wearing tefillin now, I'm being mekayim a mitzvah every minute. So if I want to make a bracha at 1:23, even though I'm wearing tefillin already, I'm not tying anything on, it's still over la'asiyasa. You know why? Because I'm making the bracha before the mitzvah that I'm going to be mekayim at 1:24. And if I make the bracha at 1:24, I'm making it before I'm mekayim the mitzvah at 1:25. Because b'chol rega v'rega, I'm continuing to be mekayim the mitzvah. So in truth, whenever you make the bracha, it is to a certain extent over la'asiyasa. Because I'm being mekayim the mitzvah again and again and again and again every minute. So it's always over la'asiyasa, as long as it's during the day. At night, there we'll have to see. Night, is it Zman Tefillin? Is it not Zman Tefillin? Is it Midaraisa, not Zman Tefillin? Is it Midrabanan, not Zman Tefillin? But as long as it's during the day, I'm a kind of mitzvah, rega v'rega. So it's always over la'asiyasan. Now that's only a b'di'evet. L'chatchila, we want you to make the bracha before you even start being mekayim the mitzvah. But b'di'evet, you can make the bracha every minute. Beautiful Mishnah Berurah. Okay. Oif kan chav zayin, koydem shebahad kan. We want you to make the bracha before you tighten the tefillin. Ki ahidu ku mitzvah sakshira. Because it's the tightening of the tefillin that is the mitzvah of tying on the tefillin. V'tzarch kan ke lizara, we have to take care. Sheyah bracha achar shemunacham al harosh. Where we put on the Shel Rosh, the bracha has to be made after the tefillin are already on the head. Not like those people who make the bracha when the Tefillin Shel Rosh is still, they're still holding it in their hand before it's on their head. No, that's not the proper time. Because again, that's a step too early. You have to put it on your head, step number 1, and then tighten it, step number 2. We want you to make the bracha before the final step, before the tightening. Gam, furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, he wants to point out another halacha. B'shas bracha shel Tefillin Shel Rosh. When you make the bracha on the Shel Rosh, Yira, you should see to it that your head should be covered with your talus or with your yarmulke. Don't make the bracha while your head is uncovered. In other words, people have to fool around with their talus, with their yarmulke, when they're getting the ritzuas of the Shel Rosh around their head. Make sure that you don't take your yarmulke off and make the bracha when your head is uncovered. Okay, now we go to Siftes. 3 lines off the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch. Asur lahafsik b'dibur. It is forbidden to be mafsik with speech. Do not talk. Bein Tefillin Shel Yad, between when you put on the Tefillin Shel Yad, Tefillin Shel Rosh, and when you put on the Tefillin Shel Rosh. Now, before we go further in the Mechaber, let's remember the Shitas of Mechaber that we learned yesterday. The Mechaber paskin that you only make one bracha on putting on the Tefillin. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Rashi, Rif. Right. This is Shitas Harambam, that you only make one bracha when you put on the tefillin. You make a lanyach tefillin, and you put on the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, and that's it. Now, based on that psak, says the Mechaber now. The Mechaber said, you're not allowed to be mafsik between putting on the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. Remember, according to the Mechaber, you made a bracha lanyach tefillin before you put on the Shel Yad, and that bracha covers the Shel Rosh as well. So says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to be mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. V'im hifsik, continues the Mechaber, if you were mafsik, if you did make a hefsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, mevarech al Shel Rosh al mitzvahs tefillin. Now, says the Mechaber, even though the Mechaber paskins that usually you only make one bracha, that's because the lahaniach is going to cover the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. But if you are mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, now the lahaniach can't go on the Shel Rosh. Now you need a bracha on the Shel Rosh. Okay, says the Mechaber, if you're going to make a bracha on the Shel Rosh, you make a bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin. That's the psak of the Mechaber. And let's see the Mishnah Berurah before we see the Ramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, also lahafsik. So first, says the Chavetz Chaim, when we say that you're not allowed to be mafsik, this is afilu b'dibur shel mitzvah. You're not allowed to be mafsik even for speech that's required for kiyum ha-mitzvah. Kigon lahashir shalom l'rabbi, like you want to return a greeting that your Rebbe came to you, shalom aleichem. You can't say aleichem shalom even to your Rebbe between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. The chol kahai gavna, or any other type of speech that's necessary for a mitzvah. Why? Ki goyrim bracha she'ena tzricha. Because, according to the Shitas HaMechaber, by speaking, by being mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, you know what you're doing? You're being goyrim a bracha she'ena tzricha. Like this, you were going to cover the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh with one bracha. You were going to cover it just with the lahaniach. Now that you are mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, now suddenly you have to make a bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's a bracha she'ena tzricha. So you know why the Mechaber over here says you're not allowed to be mafsik, and the Chavetz Chaim said you're not allowed to even be mafsik for a dibur shel mitzvah. Why? Because you're being goyrim a bracha she'ena tzricha according to the Mechaber. You're now requiring a bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin, which otherwise you wouldn't have needed. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this is a very pertinent halacha. Even those who have the minhag to put on tefillin on chalamayid, and they put on tefillin without a bracha. So you might think, if I'm putting on the tefillin without a bracha, so then I could be mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. What's the problem? Or people that have the beautiful minhag to put on tefillin Shel Tam. They put on tefillin Shel Tam without a bracha, so maybe you could be mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. Or, for whatever reason, you took off your tefillin in the middle of davening, but you had das that you're going to put them right back. Where we're going to see that the Ramah paskins, that when you go to put your tefillin back on, you don't need to make a bracha. So here we have 3 cases where you're going to put on tefillin without berachos. Chalamoid, Tefillin Shel Rabbeinu Tam, and you took off your tefillin with das to put them right back on. So in all these three cases, you're going to put on tefillin without a bracha. Are you allowed to be mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Afilu hachi aveirahi lahasiach beinein. Strong words from the Chavetz Chaim. It would be an aveira to be mafsik, to speak between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. Why? Because l'chatchila, we need the putting on of the Shel Yad and the putting on of the Shel Rosh to immediately follow one another, because it comes from a pasuk. Diksiv, because the pasuk says, "V'haya lecha la'os al yadecha." It should be for you as a sign on your hand. That's the Tefillin Shel Yad. Uluzikarein b'neinecha, and a remembrance between your eyes. That's the Tefillin Shel Yad. And the pasuk says, "V'haya lecha." It, lashon yachid. It should be for you. It's referring to the tefillin, the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, in a singular lashon. V'haya, it should be. Sheyehei avaya achas l'shteihen. They both should be as one. So l'chatchila, we want that the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, we want to get them both on without any interruption. So it's not only a shaila of a hefsek between the brachos. No, it's also that they should both be on you at the same time. Now, physically, you can't put them both on at the same time, but we want to do it as close as humanly possible. So even if it's chalamayim and you're not making a bracha, even Rabbeinu Tam tefillin and you're not making a bracha, doesn't matter. You got to get them both on without a hefsek. So no speaking between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. Ois Kana Chav Tes. The Mechaber said you shouldn't be mafsik b'dibur. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'afilu b'lashon hakodesh. Some people think that somehow if they speak b'lashon hakodesh, it's not a hefsek. No, it is a hefsek. And the Sharetzion Ois Kana Chav Ches says that this is pashut. It's obvious, but he still felt the need to say it, because there are people sometimes who, when it comes to a hefsek, like people think you're not allowed to speak in middle of Psuki de Zimra, so they speak in Lashon HaKodesh. No, Lashon HaKodesh is also a hefsek. Or lechatchila, and lechatchila says the Chavetz Chaim, aser afilu lahafsik b'shtika, even to have a long delay where you don't speak at all. Im shaya harbe shaloi l'tzarich, if you make a significant delay, shaloi l'tzarich, that's purposeless, afilu lo yisiach daitai, even if you weren't mesiach das, you didn't get distracted from the mitzvah that you're doing. Mesiach das, we understand is a hefsek. But even if you weren't mesiach das, a significant delay, l'chatchila you shouldn't do. V'afilu l'rameis be'enav, even to wink at somebody. V'likroitz bets ba'osav, or to, motion to somebody with your hands. Ben atillin shel yad ben atillin shel rosh, gam ken yesh lizar l'chatchila. Chavetz Chaim says l'chatchila you shouldn't do any of these things. No hefsek between the Tefillin Shel Yad and the Tefillin Shel Rosh. I follow the minig that I learned from Rav Moshe Zecher Tzadik Kadosh Levrach on the day that I put on my tefillin. My father Rav Shalom brought me to Rav Moshe on the day that I put on my tefillin, and when I was kabel from Rav Moshe how to put on tefillin, I put on the Shel Yad. I don't even make all 7 of the windings on the arm. So that's what he did. He put it on and did 1, 2, 3, and then just around the hand, and 3 turns on the finger, and that's it. And then put on the Shel Rosh, and only later do I do all 7 on the arm. So you want to be memayit the hefsek between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, b'chol ma de efshe. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, in the middle of Ois Kana Chav Tes. Imeniach Tefillin Shel Yad b'bayezeh. If you put on the Shel Yad in one house, or Tefillin Shel Rosh b'bayez acher, and then you left the house and you put on the Shel Rosh in another house. But you had in mind that that's what you're going to do. Maybe you had your Shel Yad handy, and your Shel Rosh was next door in the Sefer's house. He fixed it for you. So you made a bracha on the Shel Yad in your house, having in mind, I'm going next door and I'm going to get the Shel Rosh and I'm going to put on the Shel Rosh. And then you went next door. El b'Siman Chesif Yud Gimel. He sends us back to Hilchos Tzitzitz, Siman Chesif Yud Gimel, or Mishnah Berurah Sham, and in the Mishnah Berurah over there, Le'inyan Talis. We learned this halacha. Somebody put on a talis katan in one house, and he made a bracha on the talis katan, and he had in mind that he's going to go next door to the shul and he's going to put on the talis gadol. So he said it's a hefsek. It's a shinui makom. It's a hefsek. So we said really you have to make another bracha. The Mishnah Berurah brought out a Chai Adam that maybe it's not. He's chayshish for the shitas that hold that shina makom is not a hefsek, so maybe you should not make another bracha. So you can take a look back over there, Sif L'Ches, Sif Yud Gimel, and in the appropriate Mishnah Berurah. V'adin le'inyanenu. Okay. The Mechaber said, if you were mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, and again, we're still in Mechaber land. In Mechaber land, you made a lahaniach, and the lahaniach was supposed to cover the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. You goofed. You were mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. So the Mechaber said, if you were mafsik, now you have to make a bracha al mitzvah tefillin on the Shel Rosh. Mishnah Berurah is called limud v'im hifsik. Afilu b'shoigig. This is true even if you are mafsik b'shoigig. Now you have to make another bracha. Now let's go take a look at the Ramah. 2 lines off the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch, in the middle of the line. Haga, says the Ramah. Uledi done, according to us, according to Minig Ashkenaz, those of us that paskin like the Ramah, the noyagin levarich shtei brachos afim lo yihifsik. Our minig is that we always make 2 brachas. We make a lahaniach on the Shel Yad, and we make a al mitzvah tefillin on the Shel Rosh, whether we were mafsik or not. Now, if you made a hefsik, if you were mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, what do? Now, you might think, listen, this whole problem is only a problem according to the Mechaber. According to the Mechaber holds you make a lahaniach on both, on the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. So, according to the Mechaber, if you're mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, you have a problem, because now the lahaniach can't go on the Shel Rosh. So don't be mafsik, and if you did, now you got to make a new bracha, you got to make an al mitzvah on the Shel Rosh. But according to us, no problem. We make a lahaniach on the Shel Yad, and we make an al mitzvah on the Shel Rosh anyway. So what's the problem? Make a lahaniach on the Shel Yad, and then be mafsik as much as you want, and then go make a al mitzvah on the Shel Rosh and put on the Shel Rosh. What's the problem? Says the Rambam, no. Already done according to us. The noyagin levarich shtei brachos afim lo yifsik. We make 2 brachas even without a hefsik. You still got a problem. If you are mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, tzarich lachzar ulevarich al Shel Rosh lahaniach. According to us, that we paskin like Rabbeinu Tam, if you make a lahaniach on the Shel Yad, and then you're mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, now you got to make a new lahaniach on the Shel Rosh, and also an al mitzvahs on the Shel Rosh. And we'll see why in the Mishnah Berurah. The gam al mitzvahs. So if you are mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh, according to us, now you're going to end up making 3 brachas. You made a lahaniach when you put on the Shel Yad, then you are mafsik. Now you got to make a new lahaniach on the Shel Rosh, and also an al mitzvahs on the Shel Rosh. And we're going to see now in the Mishnah Berurah a very yisaidistic Mishnah Berurah that will explain why. And this will give us insight and proper understanding to our psak halacha like the Ramah, why we make the lahaniach and the al mitzvahs, and what these brachas are covering. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Lamed Aleph, a critical Mishnah Berurah. They're all critical. Oladidan de noyagin, ki atam she'anu mevarkin shtei brachos al tefillin. The reason we make 2 brachas on tefillin, v'loy dai beberachos lahaniach levad, and we paskin that it's not enough to make lahaniach, right? The Mechaber says it's enough to make just lahaniach. We paskin you need 2 brachas. Who? The reason is, sha'anu sovereign, we hold the ikar tikkun brachos, that the ikar takana of the brachas on tefillin, elu kachoisa. This is the way these brachas were mesukin. Betchilas hanachosam, when we first come to put on tefillin, tiknu levarich lahaniach, the Chazal were mesakin that we should make a bracha lahaniach tefillin. So we go to shul and we get ready to be mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin to put on a Shel Yad and a Shel Rosh. First we make a bracha lahaniach, v'koinami al Shel Rosh. But that bracha of lahaniach tefillin goes not only on the Shel Yad, it goes on the Shel Rosh too. When somebody says, I'm putting on tefillin, does he mean I'm only putting on one? No, he means he's putting on both. So when we make the bracha of lahaniach, it's going on the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. Even according to us, it goes on both. And then when we put on the Shel Rosh and we tighten it on our heads, mevarich nami al mitzvahs, now we also make a bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin, shezuhi gemar ha-mitzvah. So we make a bracha when we start out to be Mekayim the mitzvah. When we start out to go tighten on the Shel Yad, we make a bracha l'haniach tefillin, and that goes on the whole mitzvah, the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. And then when we go to complete the mitzvah, by tightening the Shel Rosh, we make another bracha al mitzvah tefillin. Hilkach, therefore, memela, it comes out, im sach, if you spoke, v'yisiach daitoi, or you got distracted and you removed your mind from the mitzvah, tzarich lachzor levarich gam l'haniach al Shel Rosh. Now you need a new l'haniach to cover the Shel Rosh, because our l'haniach always covers the Shel Rosh. So even according to us, you're not allowed to be mafsik between the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. And like the Chavetz Chaim said, you're not even allowed to motion to somebody with your hands. You're not allowed to wink at somebody with your eyes. You're not allowed to make a significant delay of time, even b'shtika, and even without being Mesiach Das. Why? Because even according to us, the bracha l'haniach has to cover the Shel Rosh. Ois katan lamed beis lachzor levarech. You got to make a new l'haniach on the Shel Rosh. Says the Chavetz Chaim, again, to cover all the bases. The nochain, if you're in such a situation, it would be proper sheyemashmesh oz b'Shel Yad, that you should feel the Shel Yad, la'azizoi mimkaimai, to move it a little bit out of its place, v'yachazik hakesher, and then to tighten the knot. Ubazeh taxa berachos l'haniach gam al Shel Yad, so that now when you make the new l'haniach, it's going on the Shel Yad also. V'doima kilu haniach ata Shel Yad v'al Shel Rosh tekufim zel ozeh, and now it's as if you're doing the mitzvah the right way, that you're making a l'haniach on the Shel Yad and you're immediately putting on the Shel Rosh. V'embirach b'loi mishmush, if you didn't do that, if you made the new l'haniach without touching the Shel Yad, yemashresh achar bracha, touch it after the bracha. V'ayin b'bir halacha mashakasavdu b'shem hagoyin, Rabbi Akiva Eger Bazeh, a very interesting bir halacha and an interesting Rabbi Akiva Eger. The Silchus Tefillin is very geschmack. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shem should send Yeshua's for force parnasit shetuchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the bias goel tzedek b'meherav yameinu amen. Be well.